It's 6 p.m. on a very snowy Wednesday evening here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Chen. Let's start with the headlines. A North Korean drone crossed the inter-Korean border but returned to the other side after Seoul's military responded with warning broadcast and shots. President Park Geun-hye addressed the nation on this Wednesday morning with her speech focusing on North Korea's latest nuke test and economic revival. Representatives of the six-party denuclearization talks from Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo meet to discuss additional measures against North Korea in response to its latest nuke test. A North Korean drone veered into South Korean territory a few hours ago, causing a stir before flying back across the inter-Korean border. We now connect to Kim Hyun-bin on the phone, who is standing by at the Ministry of National Defense. Hyun-bin, what's the latest?
Well, Daniel, South Korea Joint Chiefs of Staff said they spotted an unidentified area vehicle on the western part of the border at 2:10 p.m. This afternoon, and the military quickly responded with warning broadcasts and fired off around 20 warning shots before the drone headed back north across the border. Now, this is the first time a drone has crossed the military demarcation line since last August, and also Pyongyang's first military action since its nuclear test last week. Now, after the test, South Korea resumed its anti-Pyongyang broadcasts along the border. In response, North Korea started its own series of propaganda broadcasts on the border, though experts say these are more aimed at preventing North Koreans from hearing the South's messages, as the speakers aren't powerful enough to reach too far into the South.
Right, Hyun-bin, that's why I heard North Korea is going back to the basics. They sent thousands of propaganda leaflets over the border to Seoul and the surrounding area earlier today. The leaflets demanded an end to the loudspeaker broadcast. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, South Korea Joint Chiefs of Staff said that North Korea was seen packing the leaflets into a big plastic balloon on early Wednesday morning before sending them off. And the messages were retrieved by local police in northeastern Seoul and towns near the border. Now, the leaflets contain criticism of President Park Geun-hye as well as calls to end the South's propaganda broadcast. Now, other leaflets warn this kind of psychological warfare could spark a full-out war. Now, experts say the broadcasts are feared the most by the regime as they bring outside information to troops and residents on the border and could cause them to start questioning the regime. Back to you.
All right, thank you for that, Hyun-bin. Moving on, President Park Geun-hye addressed the nation this morning amid the heightened inter-Korean tensions following North Korea's fourth nuclear test. It was her third press conference and fifth address since taking office, and it's the first time she has held the two events at the same time, indicating the importance of her message and the current situation. Our Song Ji-sun gives us the highlights.
President Park Geun-hye got right down to business and stressed how serious the situation is right now, with the North having conducted its fourth nuclear test last week, as well as the ongoing standoff at the National Assembly, where lawmakers have yet to pass multiple bills aimed at revitalizing the economy.
안보와 경제는 국가를 지탱하는 두 축인데 지금 우리는 이 두 가지가 동시에 위기를 맞는 비상 상황에 직면해 있는 것입니다.
The president reassured the public that Seoul and Washington will work in close coordination to impose a new set of strong, comprehensive sanctions on Pyongyang at the UN Security Council, and said the two allies will do all they can to win consensus on that from the international community. The president also called on China to do its part, saying she believes Beijing will take the necessary actions in line with its stance on the denuclearization of North Korea.
어렵고 힘들 때 손을 잡아주는 것이 최상의 파트너입니다. 앞으로 중국이 안보리 상임 이사국으로서 필요한 역할을 해줄 것으로 믿습니다.
The president reiterated her commitment to keeping the Korean peninsula free of nuclear weapons in response to a question posed after the address about whether Seoul should have its own nuclear arsenal to guard against the North, and emphasized that Seoul is covered under the nuclear umbrella of the United States. As for the recent settlement with Tokyo on Japan's wartime sexual slavery, she said the agreement meets the three conditions the victims were demanding: having Tokyo acknowledge its responsibility, a formal apology, and financial compensation from the Japanese government. President Park urged lawmakers to pass counterterrorism bills to protect the public from threats coming from North Korea and elsewhere. She also urged them to pass labor reform and other economy-related bills to pave the way for new growth engines that will sustain the country for decades to come. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea, the U.S. and Japan's top nuclear envoys are meeting this evening in Seoul in the wake of North Korea's fourth nuclear test last week. Let's connect live to our Foreign Affairs Ministry correspondent Kwon So-ah at the Lotte Hotel in downtown Seoul for the details. So-ah, fill us in.
Good evening, Daniel. The South Korea's and the U.S. and Japan's top nuclear envoys are about to start their meeting, which comes exactly a week after North Korea's nuclear test last Wednesday, which was the fourth of its kind. Now, Seoul's representative Hwang Jung-guk, who is the special representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, and his U.S. and Japanese counterparts, Sung Kim and Kimihiro Ishikane, are here to discuss ways to respond to the North's provocative act, which has been condemned by the international community. It's the first in a series of bilateral and multilateral talks slated for this month. Now, after today's meeting, Hwang will head to Beijing Thursday for further talks with his Chinese counterpart, Wu Da-wei. And next Tuesday, Hwang is slated to meet with Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Igor Morgulov next Tuesday in Moscow.
And so that means Korea's representative will be meeting with all of the other members of the six-party denuclearization talks, except for that one regime that thinks it's nuclearization talks, which is North Korea. What are the main points expected to be on the table, So?
Daniel, the main focus will be on formulating a response against a united international response that is against North Korea's provocation, which means the six-party talks members will cooperate on ways to promote adoption of the United Nations Security Council resolution, which will impose new sanctions on Pyongyang. Now, the important point is how active China, North Korea's closest ally, will be in making this resolution as effective as possible. As today's three-way meeting is expected to last for around 2 hours, I'm expecting to have an update for you in our next newscast. This is Kwon So-ah reporting live on the South Korea-U.S.-Japan talks in Seoul. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, thank you for being out there for us, So-ah. Moving on, every Wednesday since 1992, victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery held protests in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul. Today, the elderly surviving victims held a press conference to announce their stance on the landmark agreement reached by Seoul and Tokyo last December. Lee Soo-eun has more.
6 elderly survivors of Japan's wartime sexual slavery made a rare appearance together to stand united against the settlement reached between Korea and Japan last December. The women, together with 2 civic groups that have long supported them, the Korean Council for the Women Drafted for Military Sexual Slavery by Japan and the House of Sharing, spoke at a press conference Wednesday during the weekly protest gathering that's been held in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul for the last 24 years. There, the survivors said they refused to accept the money pledged by Tokyo for Seoul to create a foundation for their benefit. Instead, they say they will continue their quest for an apology and reparations with supporting civic groups. Last December, Seoul and Tokyo reached a settlement on the wartime sexual slavery issue that they said would end the dispute once and for all if Japan apologizes to the victims and fulfills its pledge to provide them with 1 billion yen or $8.3 million in compensation. The settlement has been the object of widespread criticism in Korea, with the victims and supporting civic groups rejecting it repeatedly. Around 800 activists, politicians, and others were present in support of the survivors at the press conference on Wednesday. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
Turning to domestic politics now, Korea's 2 main rival parties continue to be at loggerheads over contentious issues. Making it harder to make progress is how the main opposition can't focus all of their energy at the task as the members struggle to convince lawmakers planning on abandoning ship to stay. Ji Myung-gil updates us on the developments.
The Minju Party of Korea lobbed criticism at the government's economic plan on Wednesday, which includes labor reform and restructuring, saying it does nothing to help ordinary people.
The government depends too much on conglomerates and the real estate market for economic growth. It's already the 4th year of the president's term, and there needs to be a shift in the government's economic policy.
The party continues to be gripped in a factional feud that has seen several lawmakers leave its ranks, a damaging development ahead of a general election in April. Two more lawmakers, Chu Sung-yong and Chang Byung-hwan, walked away Wednesday, with both criticizing leader Moon Jae-in for failing to overhaul the party in crisis. Since the high-profile departure of former co-leader Ahn Cheol-soo in December, 14 lawmakers from the Minju Party have quit, bringing the number of seats down to 113. Meanwhile, the parliament remains in virtual stasis, and the ruling Saenuri Party on Wednesday lashed out at the opposition for neglecting its parliamentary duties and focusing on its own internal struggle.
Korea's main opposition, Minju Party of Korea, is not taking responsibility for the continued parliamentary deadlock and is focusing only on recruiting new members. The People's Party has also failed to provide any solutions for managing state affairs and is only putting on a political show.
The party leader said the polarized opposition camp has just one thing in common: winning the upcoming general election in April and its own political gain, without any interest in improving people's livelihoods or helping to revitalize the economy. Chimyeong-gil, Arirang News.
Korea's youth unemployment rate rose to an all-time high last year. The number of new jobs added to 2015, a 5-year low. Hwang Ji-hye tells us more about the tough task ahead for the nation's new finance minister.
Korea's youth unemployment rate last year came in at 9.2%. That's the highest on record since data standards were revised in 2000. For comparison's sake, the figure during the height of the global financial crisis in 2009 was 8.1. The record unemployment figure comes as the nation's young people actively jumped into the labor market, even though job conditions were less than rosy last year. The economically active population of people ages 15 to 29 rose by 80,000, but the number of people in that group who actually found jobs last year was just 68,000. The overall labor market last year, however, did show signs of a recovery after it was hit hard by the MERS outbreak in the second quarter, thanks to government measures to boost demand in the second half.
Korea added 337,000 jobs last year on the back of an increasing number of new hires in the service sector, including social welfare and accommodations, although the number of jobs in the agriculture and finance dropped.
Still, the job creation rate is not as positive as it looks, as most of the new jobs created went to people in their 50s and 60s. The so-called real unemployment rate, which includes people who are preparing to get a job, are underemployed, or who are discouraged from finding a job, also stands at over 10%. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
It was U.S. President Barack Obama's last State of the Union address before he steps down from the post in a year's time. On Tuesday, Obama reflected on the achievements of his administration during his past 7 years in office. And according to our Kwon Jang-ho, rather than focusing on specific policy proposals, he laid out a list of issues facing the nation.
The President of the United States.
This was President Obama's goodbye address. Speaking before Congress for the last time, the speech was part greatest hits, part vision for the future.
But for my final address to this chamber, I don't want to just talk about next year. I want to focus on the next 5 years, the next 10 years, and beyond.
He reminded people of the good times, such as the country's recovery from the economic crisis he inherited, healthcare reform, and the legislation of same-sex marriage. He also mentioned his achievements overseas, such as the forging of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, restoring ties with Cuba, and the assassination of Osama bin Laden. But he also laid out 4 challenges facing the country around wealth inequality, climate change, the fight against ISIS, and reforming US politics. He conceded that one of his few regrets was that partisan politics had gotten worse.
I have no doubt a president with the gifts of Lincoln or Roosevelt might have better bridged the divide. And I guarantee I'll keep trying to be better so long as I hold this office.
He also warned those vying for his job against fear-mongering and took several barely veiled jabs at Donald Trump and his anti-immigration stance.
When politicians insult Muslims, whether abroad or our fellow citizens, when a mosque is vandalized, it's just wrong. It diminishes us in the eyes of the world. It makes it harder to achieve our goals. It betrays who we are as a country.
With only one more year left to go, Obama is now on the road to solidifying his legacy. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Good to see you.
That's all from us for now. More updates coming your way at 10 p.m. Korea time with News Center. For now, thank you for watching.